Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today we continue with chapter 6 on the Jumla Ismiya, nominal sentences in the Arabic language. In the last lesson we took a look at two fundamental components of a Jumla Ismiya, of a nominal sentence in the Arabic language, namely the mubtada and the khabar, right? The subject and the predicate, and how to identify them. We also took a look at some very basic general rules and principles to follow when identifying a mubtada and khabar sequence. We also took a look at some nuances, right? For example, when both the mubtada and khabar are ma'rifa, right? They're definite. We also took a look at an example from the Quran that introduced us to the concept of using two predicates within a nominal sentence. In today's lesson, we're going to build on some of these foundational components of the Jumla Ismiya. We're going to take a look at using inna and its ism as the mubtada. I'm also going to further expound on this concept of using multiple predicates within a nominal sentence, inshallah. So let's jump right into the text. Whenever inna is used to start a sentence, the mubtada will be inna plus the ism in attendance. We'll be addressing the sisters of inna in a separate video after we've covered the jumla fi'liya. And this is because they're typically used in more compound sentence structures, and I want to make sure that we cover it in a little more depth once we've laid a firm foundation for the jumla ismiya and the jumla fi'liya. Today we're going to be specifically looking at the harf inna, right? And this is because inna is only used at the beginning of a nominal sentence. So this will help to further reinforce the concept of inna and its ism being the mubtada, right? Which we said is from bada'a yabda'u, to begin. And the mubtada, as we know, is usually the first ism within a sentence. Here it's going to be inna plus its ism, right? The ism that it's impacting and changing into a state of nasb. Now, one thing I do want to highlight before we dive into this lesson is you don't want to confuse this with innama. And I've covered innama, which is used for hasr, giving the meaning of only in a separate video in the Arabic to English translations, right? Innama is used with both nominal sentences and verb-based sentences, right? So it's used with both nouns and verbs. So we don't want to confuse this with understanding the impact of inna and its ism in a nominal sentence structure, okay? So inna is a harf nasb that impacts the ism that follows it, changing it into a state of nasb, right? It makes it mansub. So let's take a quick look at an example of this. So we see here in this example on the screen, inna zaydan, inna zaydan, right? Zayd is a definite noun. It's an ism alam. It's a proper name, right? We have inna, which is only used at the beginning of a nominal sentence, right? So we have inna plus its ism, right? Inna zaydan. And we know that whenever inna is used at the beginning of a sentence, the mubtada is inna plus the ism in attendance, right? Plus its ism, which is, in this case, zaydan. So we've easily found the mubtada here, right? And we see that what follows is alimun, right? It's an indefinite noun in the state of rafa, so it's marfu', and it comes after the mubtada. So we're building on this basic general principle that we've learned about the khabar in our previous lesson, right? It's a noun, it's indefinite, it's in the state of rafa, right? It's marfu', and it comes after the mubtada. So alimun here is the khabar, right? Remember, inna is used for emphasis, right? So indeed, Zayd is knowledgeable. So this is a complete nominal sentence, right? We've identified the mubtada, we've identified the khabar. So inna Zaydan alimun. Indeed, Zayd is knowledgeable. So in the text, we also see this example, right? That we hold in high esteem. Inna Allaha ghafurun rahim. Right? And of course, I've left the harakat off of the word rahim for the sake of the rhyme, and also because we don't actually pronounce the voweling at the end of an ism once we complete an ayah or sentence, right? But here we see this ayah from the Quran, and really what we're going to be focusing on is right here, right? The end portion of this ayah. So we see at the ending of this ayah, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Inna Allaha ghafurun rahimun. Right? So we know from what we've just discussed that inna only appears at the beginning of a sentence. And whenever inna is used at the beginning of a sentence, the mubtada is inna plus the ism in attendance, right? Plus its ism, right? Inna Allaha, right? So we see lafdul jalala is in the state of nasb, right? It's mansub Because inna is a harf nasab, of course, right, which we've learned in the previous lessons. So inna Allah, right, indeed Allah is Ghafoor. So we very easily identified the mubtada in this sentence. And then we see that what follows is Ghafoorun, right, which is a noun. It's indefinite. It's in the state of rafa, right? It's marfu', and it comes after the mubtada, right? Which fits the bill of a khabar based on what we've learned in the previous lesson. So indeed, Allah is forgiving, right? But next to Ghafoorun, we see Rahimun, right? And this is where it gets kind of tricky because both Ghafoorun and Rahimun match in all of their properties grammatically, right? They're both singular masculine nouns that are in the state of rafa, and they're both indefinite. And from what we've learned in the previous lesson on the adjective is that this is a telltale sign of a sifa wa mawsuf fragment, when one ism follows the other and all properties match, right? But in this case, this is actually not a sifa wa mawsuf fragment, right? Ghafoorun is khabar 1 and Rahimun is khabar 2. So there are two predicates in this nominal sentence. So how do we distinguish between the two? And this goes back to a very basic rule and principle. Two or more predicates can be used in a nominal sentence with the condition that each ism, right, each predicate describes the mubtada to the same degree as opposed to describing each other, okay? Rahim here is not an adjective for Ghafoor, right? They're both descriptive qualities that refer back to the mubtada, and they describe the mubtada, i.e. lafdhul jalala, equally, right? And so we see here in this translation as well, right? Indeed, Allah is forgiving, merciful, right? Let's take a look at another example to further drive home this point. Take a look at this sentence, for example. Ar-rajulu talibun jayyidun, right? Ar-rajulu, the man, talibun, a student, jayyidun, good, right? Jayyidun, good. So ar-rajulu here, right, is an ism. It begins this sentence or this statement. It's in the state of rafa, right? It's marfu' and it's definite, right? This fits the bill of this basic general principle that the mubtada in a nominal sentence typically follows. So we've identified the mubtada here, right? The man. What about the man? Talibun, right? Talibun here, a student, is an ism. It's after the mubtada. It's in a state of rafa, right? It's marfu' and it's indefinite, right? And I'm constantly repeating these points here purposely because it's important for us to develop a particular mindset and approach when we're reading through Arabic text, right? Eventually it will come naturally to identify these things, but it's very important because grammar is somewhat mathematical, right? In the sense that, you know, it's important to follow a formula when reading through Arabic text in order to ensure that we're properly identifying the components of a sentence and understanding it correctly, right? And eventually, of course, this becomes like second nature, but it's very important to have that sort of framework initially when reading sentences and practicing your Arabic grammar, right? So the man is a student, right? The man is a student. But here at the end, we also have jayyidun, right? Jayyidun, good. And jayyidun matches talibun in all of its properties. It's a singular masculine noun that's in a state of rafa, right? It's marfu'. But what's important to identify here is this a second khabar or is this a sifa wa mawsuf fragment? So let's put this in context. Are we saying here the man is a student? Good. Or are we saying here that the man is a good student? The latter would make more sense, right? The man is a good student, right? So jayyidun here is not describing the man. We're not, you know, he might be a good man, right? But what we're looking at here is the fact that jayyidun is actually describing talibun, right? It's describing the quality of student that the man is, right? So this is how we're going to distinguish between a sifa wa mawsuf fragment and whether or not this is an additional khabar, an additional predicate. Let's take a look at another example. In this sentence here we have ar-rajulu, right, the man, halimun, forbearing or gentle, karimun, right, generous, right? So ar-rajulu here is an ism. It's at the beginning of this sentence or statement. It's marfu', right? It's in a state of rafa. It's definite. This checks all of the boxes of a mubtada. Based on the general principles that we've learned, a typical mubtada will follow, right? So we've identified the mubtada. Again, repeating this point to ensure that it's instilled in our minds. Then we have halimun, right, which follows the mubtada. It's also an ism. It's in the state of rafa, right? It's marfu', and it's indefinite, which fits the bill of the general rules and principles that a typical khabar will follow in a nominal sentence structure. So here we've identified the khabar, right? Ar-rajulu halimun. The man is forbearing. But right after halimun, we see the word karimun, right? And karim follows halim in all four properties. They're both singular masculine nouns that are in the state of rafa, right? Which at first glance fits the bill of a sifa wa mawsuf fragment, right? An adjective. But putting this sentence in context, that's actually not the case, right? Because the word karim here is not describing halim. Generous is not a descriptive quality of gentleness. Both of these qualities refer back to the mubtada. They're both describing the mubtada equally. So what's being said here is the man is forbearing, generous. It's not saying the man is generously forbearing, right? Even in context, once we translate it, it doesn't really make sense, right? So there are two ways to distinguish between a sifa and a second khabar, right? And again, to reiterate this rule, two or more predicates can be used in a nominal sentence on the condition that both khabar 1 and khabar 2 describe the mubtada to the same degree and they don't describe each other, right? So like the example that I gave you of the man being a good student, good describing student, not the man per se, right? And the man being forbearing, both qualities describing the mubtada equally, right? We can also take out ar-rajulu and say inna ar-rajula halimun karimun, right? So using either of these two formats, we can form a mubtada. But of course, the difference between the two is that inna is used for emphasis, right? So let's take a look at another example here. We see inna sayyarata sariyatun. So inna harf nasb, right? Used for emphasis. As-sayyara, we've seen this in the last lesson as well, a car. And as-sayyara, right? We see a ta marbuta at the end here, which signifies that it's a feminine word. Sariyatun, fast. So whenever inna is used to start a sentence, the mubtada is inna plus the ism in attendance. And in this case, as-sayyara, right? So inna sayyarata, indeed the car, sariyatun. Sariyatun is an ism that comes after the mubtada. It's singular and it's indefinite, right? This fits the bill of the general principle that a typical khabar follows, right? So we've identified the mubtada, we've also identified the khabar, right? And we've highlighted here the ta marbuta, showing that as-sayyara is actually treated feminine grammatically, right? Now, sariyun is how we say fast in the masculine form. But we don't just put sariyun here without adding a ta marbuta, also making the khabar feminine, because both the mubtada and the khabar have to match in number and gender. Number meaning whether it's singular, dual, or plural, and of course gender being masculine or feminine, right? So we don't say inna sayyarata sariyun, because sariyun is masculine. We say inna sayyarata, right? Sayyara being feminine, sariyatun, right? We add this ta marbuta at the end so that they match in number and gender. So let's take a look at another example from the Quran. So we see this ayah in context to those who were sent messengers, given guidance, given revelation, and denied it, right? So this is more of a compound sentence, right? But we're going to be focusing right here, right? Easy way to identify the beginning of a nominal sentence, right? We see inna right here. So whenever inna is used at the beginning of a sentence, the mubtada is inna plus the ism in attendance, right? And in this case, it's hadha. And this goes for all of the asma'ul ishara that we've learned, right? Hadha, hadihi, hadani, haula'i, etc. Okay? So we've identified the mubtada here. Then we see here, la sihrun mubinun, right? And sihr, of course, magic. Mubin, right? Something that is clear or evident, right? We've also spoken before on this lam that is used for additional emphasis that is only used with inna, right? So it's like adding an extra layer of emphasis on this ayah, right? So what did they say? Inna hadha la sihrun. Indeed, this is most definitely sihr, right? Mubinun. And sihr here is an ism, it's a noun that's after the mubtada. It's in the state of rafa, right? It's marfu' and it's indefinite, which fits the bill of what? A khabar, right? So notice that the lam here is not a harf that is affecting the i'rab of these nouns, right? It's not changing that. It's only adding an additional layer of emphasis, right? So we see here at the end, mubinun, right? Which also follows the mubtada, but it matches sihrun in all properties. Hadha here referring to the truth, right? Now, is mubin describing hadha? No, it's describing sihr, right? Indeed, this is most definitely evident sihr, clear sihr. And finally, let's take a look at our last example here from the Quran. وَقِفُوهُمْ, right? Stop them. And of course, referring to certain individuals on Yawm al-Qiyamah. This is also a compound sentence structure, but we're only going to be focusing here on this portion, right? And we see here, inna, right? Clear way to identify the beginning of a nominal sentence. And whenever we see inna at the beginning of a sentence, the mubtada is inna plus the ism in attendance, right? Hum, which is in this case an attached pronoun, meaning they, right? And we know that whenever we see an attached pronoun, it's either in a state of nasb or jar, depending on what we're dealing with. And because, of course, inna is a harf nasb, it's impacting this pronoun and changing it into a state of nasb, right? Even though it doesn't show the signs of a typical ism in the state of nasb. And this goes for all of the pronouns that we've learned, right? Huwa, huma, hum, hiya, huma, hunna, right, etc. So innahum, indeed they, and we see this ism to follow, right? Mas'ulun, it's a sound masculine plural. Why? It's matching the properties of hum. It's matching the properties of the mubtada, right? Remember we said they have to match in number and gender. In this case, hum being a plural, right? So they are mas'ulun, those who are questioned or to be questioned, right? So this is a complete jumla ismiya. Innahum mas'ulun. Indeed, they are those to be questioned, right? It's an ism, it's after the mubtada, it's in a state of rafa, right? It's marfu'. We know that mas'ulun, for example, would be in the state of rafa, whereas mas'ulina would be a clear identification that this ism is either in the state of nasb or jar, right? And with that, we complete this lesson on using inna and its ism as the mubtada. If you found this video beneficial, like, share, and subscribe so that it's able to reach others as well. And if there's anything that's unclear, share them in the comments section below, and I could make another video addressing them, inshallah. Stay tuned for the next video where we'll be talking a little bit more about the predicate. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.